Hey guys, running a bit behind today. I had a dentist appointment. I had a meeting with a buddy of mine, and I worked out this morning. So I've been running. Thank you guys for coming. Today we're going to do a Q&A at the end, and some of you have submitted questions in an earlier post that I had scheduled for like 7 o'clock this morning. So if you're watching this later and you'd like to ask questions for like next Monday's episode, I'll be posting reminders that I'm doing this, and then you can just post your questions in there if you can't make the live. If you can make the live, and if you're in the live, then just comment away and I'll answer those after this short little bit. So today's topic is the best medicine that your doctor is not prescribing and probably won't prescribe. And that is for children, that's for adults. Your pediatricians and general practitioners, physicians, aren't going to prescribe this. And that is exercise. And I know that's kind of like a buzzword of, yeah, we know we should be working out, blah, 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 blah. However, we're just going to jump right into this, guys, so buckle up. Exercise is the best, is medicine for the ADHDer. It is the best medicine for the ADHDer because it's natural and it's what we want to do anyways. That's why we can't sit still. It's because we want to move. But dipping into the science a little bit, we'll talk about what exercise does for the ADHDer. So one of the things that we know is that ADHDers are deficient in dopamine and norepinephrine, which are two neurochemicals in our brain that are responsible for the symptoms of ADHD that we all know and love. The inattention, the hyperactivity, the impulsiveness, and all of those things are all attributed to one of those two neurochemicals. And the wonderful thing that exercise does for us is that it produces those chemicals after our heart rate gets to a certain threshold. So as soon as our heart rate hits this threshold of 60 to 70% max heart rate, these chemicals are produced. They're dumped into our body. So that's kind of why if you are someone that exercises, you kind of feel a little bit more motivated. You kind of feel a little more energized to get things done, maybe come home and clean your house or something like that. That's the dopamine that's being pushed out when we exercise. And oftentimes if we have a good workout, we feel a little bit more emotionally even-keeled. And that's the norepinephrine that's getting pumped out. Our impulsivity is a little bit lessened. Our ability to regulate those things is greater because there's more of this chemical floating around in our brain helping us do that. However, the biggest takeaway from why exercise is the greatest medicine for the ADHDer that your doctor's not going to prescribe is because although when we exercise, we get that immediate dump of those chemicals, that's just like us turning the faucet on a little bit more than full blast, okay? And then the water coming out is those neurochemicals. However, for the chronic exerciser, so someone that works out a lot, and we'll kind of steer away from an exact prescription of exercise unless anyone has any questions about that. I guess we could dive into it. But the chronic exerciser. So we'll take myself for an example. I work out 6 days a week. I lift, squat, bench, deadlift, heavy, training for powerlifting competition in December. And I haven't missed a day, I don't know, like 2 years. Maybe for like some things. Like I don't think I worked out Christmas last year, but anyways. So for the chronic exerciser, what we know is although the faucet is being turned on every time that we work out, for the chronic exerciser, more faucets get created in our brain. So more faucets by which dopamine and norepinephrine can get pumped into our brain are created for the chronic exerciser, which if we know that ADHDers are deficient or they don't produce enough of these two neurochemicals, it's not a huge stretch to say that the chronic exerciser would not have as an abundant amount of symptomology of ADHD as someone that didn't work out. So take that as you will. To me, that's kind of a gold stamp on we need to exercise more, and not just for our health, but the ADHDer specifically needs to exercise so much more than everybody else, or they have more reason to work out harder than everyone else. That's so important. And real quick, let's talk about prescriptions. I don't mean to say that, I just said I was training for a powerlifting competition. That doesn't mean that every ADHDer needs to go powerlift. That's not what I mean. I know, I'll give you the exact antithesis of powerlifting. Peter Shankman, who has an amazing podcast on ADHD called Faster Than Normal. I highly recommend it. I listen to it every week. He also just came out with a book called Faster Than Normal about ADHDers, and ADHD, using ADHD to your advantage, because it is a gift. He just wrote that book, so check that out. I haven't got my copy yet. It's supposed to be in the mail. But anyways, he swears by running. He runs every morning at 4:30 in the morning, and he routinely does Ironman and marathons. If you had me do an Ironman or a marathon, I would lose my mind. I did run a half marathon years ago, and I got to like mile 3, and I was like, I'm bored. I'm ready to go home. This is boring. The training was fun, but the actual event, I was like, I'll never do this again. And so now I lift, and that works for me. That keeps me even keeled. That keeps me from bouncing off the walls. That keeps me from not being able to stay on task or stay on target when having a conversation, or even doing this live video where there's no like direct conversational feedback. I attribute that to my exercise. But find out what works best for you. If your child loves soccer, and you notice that they're doing really well just playing soccer, then like let them keep doing that. That doesn't mean, oh no, we have to go do track and field. If they want to do track and field, or if they want to play football or hockey or whatever, let them do that thing. Because if they enjoy it, chances are they're going to stick with it. And if they stick with it, then they can fall in that criteria of chronic exerciser, which is the best thing that for an ADHDer to be a chronic exerciser. So if you have any questions about exercise and ADHD, I've written a few blogs on that whole topic. I absolutely love that topic of exercise and ADHD. I've been interviewed on a bunch of podcasts, but most recently I was interviewed by Matchley Performance, Travis Mash. Travis Mash is the increasingly esteemed Olympic weightlifting coach, and hopefully he is training some of our Olympic athletes in Olympic weightlifting. I was on his podcast, and we talked a lot about exercise and mental health, and specifically ADHD. That podcast is live. It will post on this page on Wednesday, but if you're interested in listening to it early, the podcast is called The Barbell Life, and that was just this Friday, so I'll be the first hit. So give that a listen to. On to questions. We have one question from earlier this morning, and it reads, I think most parents don't like to admit their child has any type of learning disability, but for those parents who think they may, what signs would they look for? Especially if the teacher is saying they just need to mature a bit more. Really good question. I think knowing the signs and knowing the symptoms of a learning disability is huge, because then we can get the client or the student or the child the exact help that they need and what's going to be best for them. However, let me just address this first little bit. When it says, I guess that's the first sentence, most parents don't like to admit their child has any type of learning disability. ADHD is not a learning disability any more than a fish has a climbing ability compared to a monkey. I think our education system puts our ADHDers in a position to struggle and to fail consistently. The story that I always tell is the story, if you're one of my clients, you've heard this, or if you've ever talked to me about ADHD, I've told you the story. The story of the farmer. So there's this farmer, and when all new baby farm animals are born, he puts them in a black box. He's just always done this, and so he continues to do it. There's no really rhyme or reason why he does it, other than that's what he's always done. And once they reach a certain age, he takes them out of the black box, and they can begin their life on the farm and do what their jobs are. However, he decides that he's going to put the rooster in the black box, just like all the other animals that he's always done this with. And when he takes the rooster out of the box, he wakes up the next morning late, finding that the rooster did not crow. And he gets frustrated, and he puts the rooster back in the box and leaves it in there for a while, and still the rooster doesn't crow in the box. And then finally he just says, forget it. I'm never going to worry about this rooster. The rooster can just go do whatever he wants to do. I'm not going to waste my time with the rooster. And the rooster never learns to crow. The rooster doesn't know that it can crow because when it sees the sun, okay? So it's the same thing with our education system. Our education system is putting our ADHDers in a black box, asking them to perform in a way that they don't know how to. The rooster has never seen the sun in the black box, so it doesn't know that it's supposed to do that. So take that story and apply it to your child with ADHD, and let that be a bit of empathy and a bit of reassurance that yes, we are actively placing our children with ADHD in a position where they are not set up to succeed. And it's not malicious. It's just the way that we've always done these things, which isn't really a good way to do anything. So yeah, ADHD is not a learning disability. It just is. However, with going along the same lines of learning disability and the signs of diagnosing, I will say that there is a high correlation between ADHDers and learning disability, whether it's dyslexia, dysgraphia, or dyscalculia. So one of those three, there may be another one, I can't remember. But there's a high correlation that your ADHDer may have one of these learning disabilities. And I think the most important thing to do is make sure if the teacher's saying, I think Johnny has a learning disability, or I think Johnny has dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, I would assess where the teacher's coming from. If they're brand spanking new, have no education, special education, or anything like that, I would take that with the smallest grain of salt one could ever find. If it is a seasoned, 60, 70-year-old professor who is saying, yeah, I think this is going on, chances are they have the life experience to be able to give you that informed guide. Not a diagnosis, a guide. And once you have that guidepost, or at least the inkling that they actually may have a learning disability, go research as much on that learning disability as you can find and make up your mind, because you may dive into the research and dive into the literature. And when I say research and literature, I'm not talking about what's on BuzzFeed. I'm talking about what is on the reputable websites, if you can find reputable magazines, or just hard research papers, actual literature. What is that saying are the symptoms and signs of that learning disability? And if that sounds like your child, then you need to take them to a specialist. Always a specialist, guys. You would never take, if your muffler was broken, you would never take it to the guys at Walmart when there's a guy next door who only knows how to work on mufflers all the time. You would take it to the muffler shop. It's the same thing with your kids. You need to take it to a specialist. So find a specialist in learning disabilities, and there may be even a specialist for your exact learning disability, where all they do is work with kids with dyslexia. Find that person and get the diagnosis. I would even shy away from getting your diagnosis from your pediatrician or your general physician, because the amount of time it takes to make those diagnoses is so great that I would hesitate to think that your pediatrician has that much time to give in making that assessment. So they may listen to the history and kind of make an assessment. However, there are real assessments and rating scales by which you can have hard data on whether or not, yes, they have this learning disability or no, they don't. So as with anything, your greatest power in this roller coaster of ADHD is always going to be knowledge and education. So first and foremost, if you're a parent with an ADHDer, if you're an ADHDer yourself, education and knowledge is power. Otherwise, you have people making decisions for you that from the mental health field, okay? Community mental health, I worked in community mental health for 4 years, I don't know, a while, okay? You're letting them make the decisions about what's going on, and I can guarantee you that the average person would be shocked with the misinformation and the lack of education information that the experts or the people that we would trust have. I'll even say the professional straight out of graduate school who's a therapist, probably, unless they have a connection, unless they have just those learning disabilities themselves, or has family members, or just has colleagues that specialize in that stuff, they're not going to know. They're going to need to do the research themselves and then give you an answer. So knowledge is power. Find the information yourself and learn all you can about it so you can make the best possible decision for you or your child. So yeah, that was kind of like my soapbox, but it's so important that we get accurate information for our loved ones because there's a lot of riffraff out there. So it doesn't look like anyone has any other questions for me. If you do, comment below. I'll get to it later today. It may be over video again, or it may just be text, but I'll tag you so you know that you can see it. With all of that said, I'm doing this every Monday at noon. Hopefully next week I won't be late. So if you have questions, save them, or you can comment below and I'll get to it the week after, next Monday at noon. So anyways, with that, guys, I hope you have a good week. If you need anything, questions, resources, hit me up and I'll get that to you. All right, guys, have a good day.